Sawati, welcome to Bangkok. And it's rather fortuitous that we film this video from BKK for the means in which I got here. Herein lie the first trait card you should be looking at if you want to avoid slipping it into the mindless masses, the sheep, the karmic resonance. So we speak about card number 1, a man of agency, or the stallion card. And I don't mean that you own one of these many pseudo social media marketing agency like everybody and their mother. You dropped out of college, you claim to make 10K a month, but all of that is your dad's and none of that is yours. I mean, agency refers to yourself as an agent in this world, as a pawn or a piece in maybe a game of chess, but you own that piece with complete and utter jurisdiction. You have full government over yourself and you are not dependent on any other party outside yourself for your means of survival. You're skilled enough to work when you see fit, to travel per your convenience, and equally make dramatic decisions where maybe other people can't. Moving country springs to mind. Now, I do need to make a distinction here. This is not to say that this is solely for the self-employed. You might be employed but have a tremendous professional portfolio that makes you a very valuable asset in your particular selected field of work. In that way, it makes you very, very valuable for organizations and agencies in that particular field. So you kind of play the market. It's very hard to argue against the fact that you don't have agency in that regard. One way to tell if you're a man of this nature already is you'll hear often phrases like, I could never do that, or that could never be me, which in direct translation is, I can't do that. I don't have the means to be able to facilitate that particular change in my life. They have no possibility where you have the capacity and the possibility. In this way, it means you're a man of sovereignty. That's the word that you should actualize. You are a man of sovereignty. You need no permission from a spouse or a friend or an employer to be able to exert your will onto the world. A wild stallion. That's the stallion card. You cannot be tamed. Let's move over to card number 2. This is going to be a man of integration, or the king card. If you remember the king, warrior, magician, lover, the king is an integration of how you think, feel, and act in this world. Because the truth is, many men are fragmented. They're maybe disciplined in one area, they maybe lift weights or they're good at their job, but their life looks like a patchwork quilt. The king card is unique because it disregards the notion of specialization. You might have heard this quote. Specialization is for insects. It's not for people. It rejects the premise that people are only gifted in certain areas in their life because they've stolen or made sacrifices in other areas. You know what makes me think of? If you ever play like an RPG, like an Oblivion or a Fallout game, when you start with your base character, you have certain points that you allocate to intelligence, strength, speed, agility, but you can't be well-rounded. You end up prioritizing in a different area. And my point is, it doesn't have to be the case. You don't want to end up being strong, but stupid. You don't want to be socially brilliant, but financially inept. Reject this notion of sacrificing or stealing from other areas in your life. Because I would actually argue that compounding interest comes at the foundation of integration, meaning that financial strengths lead to freedom, lead to better physical health, which feeds your confidence and makes you more socially competent. So they all ebb and flow into one another if you have the interoception to recognize it. You're not a specialist pawn, you are a generalist king. I mean, you may have heard this idea of being a jack nerd, but I go one step further. Why is it only the physical and the mental? What about the spiritual? Why can't you be a jack nerd that also loves God? But it doesn't have to be particularly religious or ideological. Just, I have problems with the atheist type because their argument usually goes no deeper than scientific rationality and objectivity. At least if you're going to be an atheist, have a compelling argument. Be a philosopher. Be somebody who's thinking critically about this, because I usually find that individuals who are the real hard-nosed atheists, they're very boring. They're very boring people. They're superficial. Again, I'm generalizing here, but there's no depth to them. You want to be a deep individual. You want to be mysterious. You want to be integrated in that way with all elements of your personality. You have a mental personality, a physical personality, but you also have a spiritual personality as well. As much as you wouldn't like to believe, but it's just the truth. And the third type is a man of calibration, or the Machiavellian card. The sheep, they react kind of blindly to emotional whims or the environment. The other type, they calibrate. There is an inherent intelligence behind when to be cold steel and when to be soft velvet. Even when you're courting, this could be a critical example. Your approach is maybe softer, maybe more velvet. You're kind of feeling each other out where your rapport lies. But when it comes to physical intimacy, you want to be cold steel. You want to be masculine. You want to be the penetrative element of your you don't want to be soft and yielding in the bedroom. That's her job. But a man calibrates respective to the context in which he finds himself in. If you're a bit too hard-nosed and direct when you're building rapport, you may push people away. There's no softness to you. There's no tenderness. There's no emotional connection in that regard. But again, when it comes to the physical, you don't want to be limp, do you? I also think there's an element of flexibility that comes into calibration, meaning you want to have control, but without rigidity. In essence, if you're inflexible, you'll break. You want to be able to mold and be fluid and adapt to your particular context. This is what makes you very influential and powerful in this regard, because there's more authenticity to you, and you don't have that kind of like autopilot mode. You're more, you know what you are? You're more present. You're more in the here and now. You're more real. You're more deep. You're more authentic. You're more vibrant. You're more magnetic. You're more charismatic. All of these things. And then the extra bonus to this is what, in my personal interpretation, makes this Machiavellian, is that it makes you socially influential. People's psychology is very, very malleable comparative to yours if you find yourself congruent in most social circumstances, meaning you're unfazed, you're confident, you can adapt. You're just as confident as you are at a bar, as you are at a sports game, as you are at the opera. You're kind of like a chameleon in that way. And when you operate from that inner stoicness, that inner peace, inner tranquility, it's very, very magnetizing. I actually did a video on this previously on the celebrity effect. There's actually quantifiable evidence behind being very, very magnetic, and therefore you have a lot more social push. You can draw on social favors, for example, but don't use this power for evil. Use it for good. Although I know that goes contrary to the Machiavellian temperament. These are not theories, these are facts. Speak soon.